A runaway bride was about to jump off the bridge when a homeless man grabbed her. When she discovered who he really was, she fell to her knees. The cold woke Michael Johnson before dawn. His bones ached against the concrete, the cardboard beneath him doing little to soften the ground. He pulled his thin blanket tighter, but the October wind cut right through it. The rumble of early morning traffic on Michigan Avenue Bridge above made the ground vibrate beneath him. Another day, he mumbled, sitting up slowly. His joints cracked. At 35, his body felt twice that age. The first rays of sunlight painted the Chicago River in dull orange. Michael gathered his few possessions into a worn backpack. The blanket, a water bottle, and a wrinkled photo of himself in a suit, standing in front of his old counseling office. He touched the photo briefly, then tucked it away. Other homeless people were stirring under the bridge. Old Pete wrapped in newspapers. Maria with her shopping cart full of cans. They nodded to each other. The silent morning ritual of Chicago's forgotten. "Morning, brother," Pete called out, his voice rough from sleep. "Gonna be a cold one today?" "Yeah," Michael replied, stretching his tall, lean frame. "Getting colder every day." He made his way up the concrete slope to street level. The morning rush had begun. Suits and briefcases, the click of heels on pavement. People's eyes slid past him like he was invisible. 2 years ago, he'd been one of them, wearing a tie, carrying a leather briefcase, helping people work through their problems. The dumpster behind Giovanni's restaurant was his first stop. The owner sometimes left good food in separate bags, a small kindness Michael had come to depend on. "Mr. Johnson?" A voice made him freeze, hands deep in the dumpster. He turned to find Tony, Giovanni's teenage son, holding a paper bag. "Dad said to give you this. It's yesterday's lasagna and some bread." Michael's throat tightened. "Thank your father for me, Tony. He says—" Tony hesitated. "He says you should come inside sometime. Maybe wash up in the bathroom, have a hot coffee. Maybe someday," Michael said, but they both knew he wouldn't. The shame was too heavy. He took his breakfast to a quiet corner of Grant Park. The lasagna was still good, even cold. As he ate, his mind drifted to his last day at the counseling center. The missed appointments, the unopened bills, the darkness that had swallowed him whole until he couldn't get out of bed, couldn't answer his phone, couldn't face his clients or himself. Depression had taken everything, his practice, his apartment, his dignity. Now here he was, 2 years later, eating from dumpsters and sleeping under a bridge. The community shelter opened at 10 a.m. Michael waited in line with others, clutching his towel, one of his most prized possessions. The shower would be quick and lukewarm, but it was better than nothing. 10 minutes each, the shelter volunteer called out. "And please leave some hot water for others." In the mirror above the sink, Michael barely recognized himself. His face was gaunt, his eyes tired. His black skin had a grayish cast from poor nutrition and exposure. He'd lost the confident look he used to have, the one that made clients trust him with their deepest fears. "Time's up." The volunteer knocked on the door. Back on the streets, Michael walked without destination. He passed his old office building, but didn't look up at the windows. He couldn't bear to see the new name on the directory where his used to be. A group of suited men exited a coffee shop. One of them stopped short. "Dr. Johnson?" The man squinted at him. "Is that really you?" Michael turned away quickly, hurrying down the street. Behind him, he heard the man say to his colleagues, "No, couldn't be. Just looked like someone I used to know." The day passed slowly. Michael collected some cans, $3.75 worth. He found half a sandwich someone had thrown away. He listened to Maria talk about her kids, who didn't visit anymore. He helped Pete set up his cardboard shelter when the old man's arthritis was acting up. As the sun began to set, Michael made his way back to his spot under the bridge. The temperature was dropping fast. He could see his breath in the air. "Gonna freeze our asses off tonight," Pete grumbled, already wrapped in his newspapers. "We always survive somehow," Michael replied, though he wasn't sure how much longer that would be true. Chicago winters were brutal, and he was already wearing every piece of clothing he owned. The city lights began to twinkle on the river. Traffic thinned above. Michael pulled out his blanket and the photo from his backpack. He stared at his former self, clean-shaven, smiling, full of purpose. The man in the photo helped people. He made a difference. He mattered. A sound caught his attention, the click of heels on the bridge above, uneven and stumbling. Something about the rhythm seemed wrong. Michael sat up straighter, listening. In his years on the street, he'd learned to read the sounds of the city, to sense when something wasn't right. The footsteps stopped. A sob carried on the wind. Michael stood, his counselor's instincts stirring for the first time in years. The footsteps had stopped in the middle of the bridge. Never a good sign at this hour. He grabbed his blanket and made his way up to street level, his heart beginning to pound. What he saw that would change everything. A woman in a white dress stood at the bridge's edge, her hands gripping the railing. Her veil fluttered in the cold wind. She was looking down at the dark water below, and even from a distance, Michael could see she was shaking. For 2 years, he'd been invisible. For 2 years, he'd walked past others' pain, focused only on surviving his own. But now, watching this bride teeter on the edge of despair, Michael Johnson felt something wake up inside him. The part of him he thought had died along with his old life. The part that couldn't walk away from someone in pain. The temperature display on the bank across the street blinked. 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Michael's breath came out in white puffs as he watched the bride. His thin jacket offered little protection against the bitter wind whipping off Lake Michigan. Just wait, he whispered to himself, rubbing his hands together. Think this through? The last time he'd tried to help someone, a woman had screamed and called the police. He'd spent the night in jail. Lucky the officers had recognized him from his counseling days. The shame of that night still burned. Traffic had thinned to almost nothing. The city hummed quietly around them. Car horns in the distance, the rattle of an L train, music from a far-off bar. The bride hadn't moved, still gripping the railing with white knuckles. Michael's teeth chattered. The cold was getting dangerous. He needed to get back under the bridge, wrap himself in his blanket, try to survive another freezing night. But his legs wouldn't move. I can't do this again, the bride said suddenly, her voice carrying on the wind. She wasn't talking to him, probably didn't even know he was there. I can't face them. I can't. The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. How many times had he said those exact words to himself in the months before he lost everything? How many nights had he lain awake, paralyzed by the thought of facing another day? A memory surfaced his last session as a counselor. The client, a young man, had been talking about ending it all. I'm just so tired, the man had said. I know, Michael had replied. But being tired isn't the same as wanting to die. Sometimes we just need someone to help us rest. That client had lived, had gone on to get married, have kids. Michael had seen him once, months ago, pushing a stroller down Michigan Avenue. He hadn't recognized his former counselor digging through a trash can. The bride took a small step closer to the edge. The heel of her white shoes scraped against concrete. Miss, Michael called out, his voice rusty from disuse. It's pretty cold out here. She startled, spinning to face him. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black streaks. Stay back, she warned. Don't come any closer. Michael raised his hands, staying where he was. I won't move. Just thought you might want this. He held out his blanket, his only real possession besides the photo. Like I said, it's cold. She stared at him, then laughed, a sharp, broken sound. I'm standing on a bridge in my wedding dress, and you're worried about me being cold? Well, hypothermia is no joke, Michael said, trying to keep his voice casual despite his pounding heart. Especially not in Chicago. Cities should warn tourists about our winters. I'm not a tourist. She turned back to the water. I grew up here, getting married here, was supposed to get married here. The past tense made Michael's skin prickle. He took one slow step forward. Want to tell me what happened? Why do you care? She snapped. You don't know me? True, Michael agreed. But I know what it's like to stand somewhere high up and think about ending it all. To feel like there's no way forward. She looked at him again, really looked at him this time. Took in his ragged clothes, his gaunt face. You're homeless? 2 years now, he said. Used to be a counselor. Had an office on Wacker Drive. Lost it all when depression hit. Couldn't get out of bed, couldn't work, couldn't pay bills. Ended up here. He gestured to the space under the bridge. That's my spot down there. Why are you telling me this? Because 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. And maybe it was in a way. But I'm still here. Still breathing. Still helping people when I can, even if it's just sharing a blanket on a cold night. The bride's hands loosened slightly on the railing. He was sleeping with my bridesmaid, she said suddenly. I found out an hour before the ceremony. Walked in on them in the church basement. Her voice cracked. 300 guests upstairs. My father spent a fortune on this wedding. He's going to kill me. What's your name? Michael asked softly. She hesitated. Sarah. Sarah Thompson. Thompson? The name clicked. As in Thompson Industries? She nodded miserably. Daddy's little disappointment. Now more than ever. The wind picked up, howling between the buildings. Sarah shivered violently in her sleeveless dress. Sarah, Michael said, taking another careful step forward. The water's about 40 degrees right now. If you jump, you'll be conscious for around 15 minutes. That's 15 minutes of terror, of your body fighting to live even if your mind's made up. I've seen people pulled out of that river. It's not a peaceful way to go. Stop, she whispered. Please stop. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to be honest. Something your bridesmaid and fiancé weren't. Something your father maybe hasn't been either. Sarah's shoulders began to shake. Whether from cold or emotion, Michael couldn't tell. I can't go back, she said. Can't face everyone. Can't see the pity in their eyes. Can't handle my father's disappointment. Again. So don't go back, Michael said simply. Not tonight, anyway. Tonight, you could just be cold and angry and sad. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out the rest. He held out the blanket again. Sarah stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. I don't know what to do, she admitted, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. Nobody does most of the time, Michael said. We just keep breathing until we figure it out. Sarah took a shaky step away from the railing. Then another. Michael stayed perfectly still, letting her move at her own pace. A siren wailed in the distance, getting closer. Sarah tensed. Someone probably called the police, Michael said quietly. They'll want to help, but if you're not ready for that, we can go down to my spot under the bridge. It's not much, but it's out of the wind. We can just sit and talk until you're ready to face whatever comes next. The siren grew louder. Sarah looked at Michael, then at the railing, then back at Michael. The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. Okay, she whispered. Okay. The siren turned onto Michigan Avenue, red and blue lights, painting the bridge in alternate colors. Sarah took another step toward Michael, hugging his blanket tightly around her shoulders. And that's when they heard the shouting from the other end of the bridge. Get away from her. A man's voice boomed across the bridge. Police! There's a homeless man threatening my daughter. Sarah froze. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Michael's stomach dropped. He'd seen Robert Thompson on TV enough times to recognize that voice. The CEO of Thompson Industries was running toward them, followed by two police officers with their hands on their holsters. Step away from the woman, one officer shouted. Hands where we can see them. Michael slowly raised his hands, his heart hammering. This was exactly what he'd feared, how it would look to anyone else. A homeless black man approaching a white woman in a wedding dress at night. Daddy, stop. Sarah called out. He's helping me. He's trying to help. But Robert Thompson was already there, grabbing Sarah and pulling her away from Michael. The police officers positioned themselves between them, one training his flashlight on Michael's face. Sir, on your knees, the officer ordered. Hands behind your head. Officer Jenkins? Michael said quietly, recognizing the cop. It's Michael Johnson. Remember me? I helped your sister with her anxiety attacks 2 years ago. The flashlight wavered. Dr. Johnson? What happened to you, man? Wait, Robert Thompson interrupted. Dr. Johnson? The therapist? Former therapist. Michael corrected, still on his knees with his hands behind his head. Your daughter was considering jumping. I was trying to talk her down. Sarah? Thompson turned to his daughter. Is this true? Sarah clutched Michael's blanket tighter around her shoulders. James was cheating, she said, her voice breaking. With Rachel. In the church basement. I couldn't face everyone. I ran. Ended up here. Thompson's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Shock, anger, concern, and finally, something like shame. Why didn't you call me? Because you always fix everything. Sarah burst out. Because you would have thrown money at it until it went away, just like every other time I've messed up. Because I couldn't stand to disappoint you again. Ma'am, the second officer said gently, we got a call about a potential jumper. Are you having thoughts of self-harm? Sarah looked at Michael, who gave her a small nod. I was, she admitted. But Dr. Johnson, he helped me see things differently. Officer Jenkins, Michael said, my knees are killing me. Mind if I stand up? Yes, sorry, Doc. You can get up. Jenkins lowered his flashlight. But we still need to file a report about this incident. Michael stood slowly, his joints protesting. The wind had picked up again, and without his blanket, the cold cut straight through his thin jacket. Sarah, Thompson said, we need to get you somewhere warm. Talk about this properly. I'm not going home, Sarah said firmly. I can't face Mom right now, or anyone else. Then we'll go to the peninsula. I'll get you a room. Thompson turned to Michael. Dr. Johnson, I don't know how to thank you. Michael shrugged. Just did what anyone would do. No, Thompson said sharply. No, that's not true. Most people walked right past my daughter tonight. You didn't. Even knowing how it might look, what people might assume. You stopped. You helped? He paused. And now I'm going to help you. Mr. Thompson Robert, Thompson interrupted. And I'm not taking no for an answer. You're coming to the peninsula too. Get a hot shower, proper meal, good night's sleep. Tomorrow, we'll talk about getting you back on your feet. Michael opened his mouth to refuse, but Sarah spoke first. Please, she said. I think I still need to talk. And I'd rather talk to you than some stranger in the ER. The police officers exchanged looks. If Ms. Thompson is with family and has access to mental health support, we don't need to involve emergency services, Jenkins said. But we do need contact information for follow-up. Thompson pulled out a business card and handed it to Jenkins. Call my office tomorrow. We'll have Dr. Johnson's new information by then, too. New information? Michael asked. You're a licensed therapist who just talked my daughter off a bridge, Thompson said matter-of-factly. Thompson Industries has been looking to expand our employee mental health services. Seems to me the perfect candidate just fell into our lap. Michael stared at him. I haven't practiced in 2 years. My license can be reinstated. I have lawyers for that. Thompson's tone made it clear this wasn't up for debate. Now, can we get out of this damn cold? Sarah took a step toward Michael, still wrapped in his blanket. You'll come? She asked quietly. Please? Michael looked at her, then at the bridge railing, then at his spot under the bridge where Pete and Maria would be wondering where he was. 2 years of survival, of invisibility, of just getting through each day. Maybe it was time for something more. Okay, he said finally. Okay. Thompson pulled out his phone to call his driver. The police officer started filling out their report. Sarah stood close to Michael, both of them staring out at the city lights reflecting on the dark river below. Thank you, she whispered. For the blanket. For everything. Michael nodded. Keep it. It's cold out here. A black SUV pulled up to the bridge. The driver jumped out to open the doors. Thompson gestured for Sarah to get in first. Before following her, Michael turned for one last look at his spot under the bridge. For 2 years, it had been his whole world. Now, in the space of an hour, that world had cracked open. Dr. Johnson? Thompson called. You coming? Michael took a deep breath of the cold night air. Then he turned and walked toward the SUV, toward whatever came next. Behind him, the Michigan Avenue Bridge stood silent and dark, keeper of countless stories of endings and beginnings, of despair and hope, of lives intersecting in the cold Chicago night. And beneath it, an empty spot where a homeless man used to sleep, marked only by a few footprints in the dirt and the memory of a blanket freely given. The Peninsula Hotel's lobby gleamed with marble and gold. Michael stood awkwardly by a pillar, painfully aware of his ragged clothes and unwashed state. The night manager kept glancing his way, clearly wanting to ask him to leave. It's fine, Henderson, Thompson said sharply, noticing the manager's looks. Dr. Johnson is my guest. Sarah still hadn't let go of Michael's blanket. She sat on a plush couch, her wedding dress wrinkled and dirty at the hem, mascara dried in black trails down her cheeks. I've got 2 suites, Thompson said, returning with key cards. Sarah, you'll take 1506. Dr. Johnson, you're in 1508. He hesitated. Would you? Would you mind talking with her first? Before we all get some rest? Michael nodded. Of course. The elevator ride was silent. Sarah stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls, touching her smeared makeup. When they reached the 15th floor, Thompson stepped out first. I'll be in the lobby making some calls, he said. Take all the time you need. Sarah's suite was bigger than Michael's old apartment. She sank into an armchair by the window, looking out at the city lights. Michael took the chair opposite her, trying not to think about how his dirty clothes might stain the expensive fabric. Want to tell me about James? He asked quietly. Sarah's hands tightened on the blanket. We dated for 3 years. He was Daddy's choice. Young executive, good family, perfect corporate match. She laughed bitterly. Rachel was my best friend since college. She helped me pick out this dress. When did you first suspect? I didn't. Sarah's voice cracked. That's the worst part. I was so stupid, so blind. All those late meetings, business trips together. She stood suddenly, pacing to the window. I walked in on them an hour before the ceremony. Rachel was adjusting her bridesmaid's dress. James was helping. Michael stayed silent, letting her talk. 300 guests upstairs, Sarah continued. Governor's there, mayor, all Daddy's business partners, reporters from the Tribune. And I'm standing there in my dress, watching my fiancé zip up my best friend's dress, both of them looking at me like your whole world just shattered. Michael finished softly. Yes. Sarah pressed her forehead against the cold window glass. I ran. Just ran. Didn't think, didn't plan. Ended up on that bridge, and she turned to face him. I wasn't really going to jump. I don't think. I just needed everything to stop. I know that feeling, Michael said. When I was at my lowest, it wasn't that I wanted to die. I just wanted the pain to end. How did you survive it? Living on the streets? One breath at a time. Found small kindnesses. Restaurant owner who'd leave food out. Shelter volunteer who'd give me extra shower time. Other homeless folks who'd share what little they had. He smiled slightly. Kept my counselor's brain working by helping them with their problems easier than facing my own. Sarah returned to her chair. Tell me about your last day. Before everything, Michael closed his eyes, remembering. I had 6 clients scheduled. Didn't show up for any of them. Couldn't get out of bed. Phone kept ringing, clients, landlord, credit card companies. Eventually, I just unplugged it. Stayed in bed for 3 days straight. By the time I finally got up, I'd lost my practice, my apartment, my savings. But you were sick, Sarah protested. Depression is an illness. Couldn't you get help? Pride's a funny thing. I was supposed to be the helper, not the one needing help. By the time I admitted I needed it, I couldn't afford it anymore. He leaned forward. That's what I want you to understand, Sarah. Asking for help isn't weakness. Running from that church today, that took courage. Daddy doesn't see it that way. He sees it as another failure. Like dropping out of law school, like the gallery that went bankrupt. He keeps giving me chances, and I keep disappointing him. Is that what he says, or what you believe? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Thompson entered, carrying a tray. Thought you both might need this. He set down coffee, sandwiches, and a first aid kit. Sarah, your mother's handling things at the church. She'll be here in the morning. Sarah tensed. Daddy, I can't dash, you can, he said firmly. But not tonight. Tonight, you rest. Talk to Dr. Johnson. Let me handle the fallout. He turned to Michael. There's a robe in your room, toiletries, fresh clothes being sent up. When you're done here, get cleaned up, get some sleep. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we'll talk about your future. After Thompson left, Sarah picked up a sandwich, but just held it, not eating. He's doing it again, she said softly. Taking control. Fixing everything. Is that so bad? It's suffocating. Everything in my life has been chosen by him. My schools, my jobs, my... She gestured to her wedding dress. Look how well that turned out. What would you choose? Michael asked. If you were choosing for yourself? Sarah was quiet for a long time. I love photography, she said finally. Not the fancy gallery stuff Daddy funded. Just real moments, real people. There's this community center in Bronzeville. They need someone to teach basic photography to kids. I applied last month. They offer me the job, but $300 a week. Daddy spends that on lunch. She smiled sadly. Couldn't disappoint him again. So I said no, agreed to work for Thompson Industries instead. Agreed to marry James. And now, Sarah stood, letting the blanket fall. She walked to the full-length mirror, staring at herself in the ruined wedding dress. Now everyone knows I'm a failure anyway. Might as well fail doing something I love. Sarah, Michael said carefully, I don't see failure when I look at you. I see someone brave enough to walk away from a lie. Someone strong enough to choose truth, even when it hurts. She turned to him, tears in her eyes. Did you ever regret it? Not asking for help sooner. Every day. Michael stood, moving to the window. But we can't change the past. We can only learn from it. Use it to help others. Is that what you're doing with me? Using your past to help. Maybe we're helping each other? Sarah wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara further. Will you come with me tomorrow? When I talk to Mom, I don't think I can face her alone. Michael thought about Thompson's offer, about his own future hanging in the balance. Yes, he said. I'll be there. Sarah nodded, relief visible on her face. Then she frowned, looking past him out the window. Is it snowing? Michael turned. Fat white flakes were falling past the window, the first snow of the season. Somewhere under the Michigan Avenue Bridge, his old spot was getting covered in white. Pete and Maria would be huddling closer together, sharing newspapers and body heat. I should check on them, he said quietly. Your friends under the bridge? Sarah asked. When he nodded, she squared her shoulders. I'll come with you. Sarah Dash, please. She met his eyes. I need to do something real tonight. Something that matters. Michael looked at her, seeing past the smeared makeup and expensive dress to something stronger underneath. Okay, he said, but first you should change. And we'll need more blankets. For the first time that night, Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I'll call room service. And Michael? She touched his arm. Thank you for seeing me. The real me? Outside, the snow fell harder, covering Chicago in a blank white page. A new chapter, waiting to be written. The snow crunched under their feet as Michael and Sarah made their way back to the bridge. She wore hotel sweats and boots borrowed from housekeeping, carrying a duffel bag full of blankets. The wedding dress lay crumpled on her hotel room floor. They might not trust you at first, Michael warned. Street folks learn to be careful around strangers. Even strangers bearing blankets? Especially them. Kindness usually comes with strings attached. The city looked different under the snow, softer, quieter. Their breath came out in white clouds. Sarah stopped at a 24-hour diner. We should bring food too, she said. 10 minutes later, they carried coffee and hot soup along with the blankets. As they approached the bridge, Michael heard Pete's familiar cough. Who's there? Pete's voice called out. Michael? That you? It's me, Pete. Brought some help. Maria emerged from her cardboard shelter, eyeing Sarah suspiciously. Who's the fancy lady? This is Sarah. She's... Michael hesitated. I'm his friend, Sarah said firmly. We brought soup. And blankets. Pete shuffled forward, snow dusting his gray hair. You're that bride. The one from earlier. Sarah nodded. Yes. You okay now, girl? Maria asked, her suspicion softening slightly. Getting there? Sarah started unpacking the duffel bag. These blankets are wool. Should help with the cold. Michael watched as she handed out blankets, poured soup into paper cups, talked with Pete about his arthritis. No pity in her voice, no condescension. Just one human being helping another. Your daddy know you're here? Maria asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. No. Sarah handed her a coffee. But I'm done letting him decide where I should be. A police car rolled by slowly, its spotlights sweeping the area. Everyone instinctively drew back into the shadows until it passed. They'll be doing checks all night in this weather, Michael said. Looking for people to take to the shelters. Why don't you go? Sarah asked. Pete barked a laugh. Shelters got rules, girl. No drinking, no drugs, no staying together if you ain't married. Maria here's like a sister to me. Won't leave her alone. And the shelters don't let you keep your stuff, Maria added. Everything I own's in this cart. It's not much, but it's mine. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What if I could help? Find a place where you could stay together. Keep your things. Sarah, Michael warned. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not. She turned to him. That community center I told you about? They have space. Empty rooms they can't afford to renovate. What if? What if your father kills this idea like he killed your photography job? He won't. Sarah's voice was steel. Not this time. A gust of wind howled under the bridge. Maria pulled her blanket tighter. You got a good heart, girl, she said. But good hearts get broken out here. Mine's already broken, Sarah replied. Might as well use the pieces to build something worthwhile. Michael felt something shift in his chest, recognition, maybe the same fire that had driven him to become a counselor, to help others heal. He'd thought that fire was dead, smothered under 2 years of survival. But watching Sarah, seeing her transform her pain into purpose, he felt it flickering back to life. Tell us about this community center, he said. Sarah's face lit up. It's in an old warehouse. They run after-school programs, job training, literacy classes. But they need help. Teachers, counselors. She looked at Michael meaningfully. Sarah think about it, she pressed. You could counsel people who really need it. No insurance forms, no corporate red tape. Just helping people heal. Ain't nobody gonna trust some fancy office counselor, Pete said. No offense, Michael, but they might trust someone who's been where they are, Sarah countered. Someone who knows what it's like to lose everything and survive. More police cars were circling the area now. Their radios crackled with reports of temperature dropping, hypothermia risks, emergency shelter protocols. We should get you back, Michael said to Sarah. Your father will be worried. Let him worry. But she stood anyway, brushing snow from her sweatpants. I'll be back tomorrow, with more blankets, and maybe some news about that community center. Sarah, Maria called as they turned to leave. Thank you for seeing us. Really seeing us. In the street light, Michael saw tears freeze on Sarah's cheeks. They walked back toward the hotel in silence. The snow was falling harder now, erasing their footprints almost as soon as they made them. I meant what I said, Sarah finally spoke. About the community center. About you counseling there. Your father's offering me a corporate job. Benefits. Stability. Is that what you want? To counsel rich executives through their midlife crises. Michael stopped walking. What I want? He laughed bitterly. I haven't thought about what I want in 2 years. Been too focused on surviving. Think about it now. He looked back toward the bridge, where Pete and Maria would be settling in under their new blankets. I want to help people who think they're beyond help. People who've hit bottom and can't see a way up. Like you did for me tonight? Like you did for Pete and Maria just now. Sarah touched his arm. So do it. Help me build something real at that community center. Something that matters. Your father stop. Sarah's voice was sharp. Stop thinking about what my father wants. Or what anyone else wants. What do you want, Michael? He closed his eyes, feeling the snow settle on his face. For 2 years, he'd been numb, to cold, to pain, to hope. But standing here with Sarah, talking about possibilities instead of just survival, he felt something thaw inside him. I want to help, he said simply. Not from some corporate office. Not with PowerPoints and performance metrics. Just help, like I used to, like I was trained to do. Sarah smiled. Then that's what we'll do. Your father won't like it. No, she agreed. But maybe it's time we both stopped living for his approval. They reached the hotel. In the lobby, Thompson was pacing, phone to his ear. He saw them, and his face darkened. Where have you been? He demanded, hanging up. It's freezing out there. Sarah, your mother's on her way. And Michael, we have a meeting with HR in the morning. Sarah squared her shoulders. Actually, Daddy, we need to talk. About the community center in Bronzeville. About what I want to do with my life. What we want to do. She reached for Michael's hand. He hesitated for a moment, then took it. Together, they faced Thompson, ready to fight for something bigger than survival. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Chicago in possibilities. Thompson's face reddened. The community center? That photography nonsense again? He turned to Michael. I'm offering you a real job. Benefits. A future. And you're going to throw it away for some pipe dream? The hotel lobby was empty except for them and Henderson, the night manager, trying his best to look busy while obviously listening to every word. It's not nonsense, Sarah said. And it's not just about photography anymore. Michael, and I dash, Michael. Thompson's voice rose. You've known this man for 3 hours. He's been living under a bridge. Robert, Michael started, but Thompson cut him off. No, I'm grateful for what you did tonight. I am. But this ends now. Sarah, go upstairs. Your mother will be here soon. Dr. Johnson, I'll have my driver take you to a shelter for tonight. Tomorrow, we can discuss your position at Thompson Industries. A real position. Sarah's hand tightened around Michael's. I'm not going upstairs. And Michael's not going to a shelter. Sarah Dash, no, you listen to me? Her voice echoed in the marble lobby. For once in your life, just listen. I spent 3 years with a man you chose for me. With the clothes you approved. Took the job you wanted. And where did it get me? Standing on a bridge. Ready to jump. Henderson dropped his pen. The clatter seemed very loud in the sudden silence. But Michael saw me, Sarah continued, quieter now. Not as Robert Thompson's daughter. Not as some corporate asset. He saw me. And you know what? Tonight I saw him too. Saw him help people you wouldn't even look at. People with nothing left but their dignity. People need more than dignity, Thompson said. They need stability, security dash. They need hope. Sarah's voice cracked. They need to know someone gives a damn about them as human beings, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. The elevator dinged. A woman in an expensive coat stepped out, her face tear-stained but composed. Mom, Sarah whispered. Eleanor Thompson crossed the lobby with quick steps. Sarah, darling. Are you Dash? She stopped, seeing Michael. Who is this? The homeless man who saved our daughter, Thompson said before anyone else could speak, and who's now apparently convinced her to throw away everything for some community center scheme. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. The man who saved our daughter, she repeated slowly, is homeless? Was homeless, Sarah corrected. And he's a licensed therapist. Was one of the best in Chicago before depression took everything from him. Just like I almost lost everything tonight. Eleanor turned to Michael. You stopped her? On the bridge. Michael nodded. She didn't need much stopping. Just needed someone to listen. Like you used to do, Sarah added. Before everything fell apart. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, studying them both. Robert, she said finally. When was the last time you saw our daughter smile? Really smile? Thompson blinked. What? Because I saw it. Just now, when she was defending this man and their community center idea. When was the last time you saw that fire in her eyes? Elle, this isn't about Dash. It's about everything. Eleanor's composure cracked. Our daughter almost died tonight. Not from some stranger's violence, but from the life we pushed her into. The life you pushed her into. The lobby fell silent again. Outside, the snow kept falling. Henderson had given up pretending not to listen. The community center needs renovation, Sarah said into the silence. About half what you spent on tonight's wedding. They need teachers, counselors, people who understand trauma and healing. People like Michael. And you? Thompson asked, his voice tired. What would you do there? Teach photography. Document their stories. Show the world that everyone deserves to be seen. Really seen? Eleanor touched her husband's arm. Robert, please. Thompson looked at his daughter, then at Michael. You really want this? To counsel people who can't pay? Work in some rundown center instead of a proper office? I want to help people heal, Michael said simply. That's all I've ever wanted, even when those people couldn't help you. When you needed healing yourself? Michael felt Sarah's hand squeeze his. Maybe especially then, because now I understand both sides. The helper and the one needing help. Snow swirled against the lobby windows. Somewhere under the bridge, Pete and Maria would be huddled under their new blankets, sharing warmth and stories. Somewhere in an empty church, Sarah's wedding flowers were wilting. Somewhere in the city, other people stood on other bridges, needing someone to see them, to listen, to care. Thompson ran a hand over his face. The center will need proper permits. Insurance. A board of directors. Sarah's breath caught. Daddy, if... Thompson held up a hand. If we do this, we do it right. Legal. Professional. Dr. Johnson gets his license reinstated first. And you, young lady, finish your business degree. But dash, part-time, he amended, while teaching photography. If you're going to run a nonprofit, you need to understand the business side. Eleanor smiled, tears in her eyes. Robert, I'm not promising anything, Thompson said quickly. First, I want to see this center, meet the people running it. And Dr. Johnson, you'll need to pass a psychological evaluation before counseling anyone. So you ready? I understand, Michael said. Do you? Because this isn't a fairy tale. It's going to be hard work, long hours, frustration, disappointment, like standing on a bridge in the snow. Sarah asked, like sleeping under it? Thompson sighed. Go upstairs. Both of you. Get some rest. Tomorrow. He shook his head. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to turn this crazy idea into something real. Sarah hugged him suddenly. Thank you, Daddy. Don't thank me yet. But he hugged her back, holding her tight. Just don't ever scare me like that again. Please. I won't. I promise. Eleanor touched Michael's arm. Thank you for being there when we weren't. Michael nodded, not trusting himself to speak. 2 years of survival, of invisibility, of just getting through each day. And now this. Come on, Sarah said, tugging his hand. We both need sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. They rode the elevator in silence. At their doors, Sarah turned to him. Are you okay with all of this? Michael looked at his reflection in the mirrors, the ragged clothes, the tired eyes. Tomorrow, he'd shower, shave, put on clean clothes, start the long journey back to who he used to be. No, not back. Forward to someone new. Someone who understood both sides of healing. I'm okay, he said. Are you? Sarah smiled. That real smile that reached her eyes. I'm gonna be. We both are. Inside his suite, Michael sat on the edge of the bed. The sheets were soft, the room warm. So different from his spot under the bridge. He thought about Pete and Maria, about the other invisible people in Chicago's shadows. Tomorrow, he'd start helping them, really helping them. But tonight he slept, and for the first time in 2 years, he dreamed of something more than survival. Morning came too soon. Michael woke disoriented, the soft bed foreign after 2 years of concrete. His muscles ached from the warmth. His body didn't know how to relax anymore. The bathroom mirror showed a stranger. Dark circles under his eyes, beard wild and gray-streaked, skin ashen from malnutrition. The hotel had provided toiletries, razor, toothbrush, comb, basic things he hadn't owned in years. The shower ran hot for more than 2 minutes. He stood under it until his skin turned red, watching 2 years of street life swirl down the drain. When he finally stepped out, a set of clothes waited on the bed, jeans, sweater, new underwear, all in his size. Thompson's efficiency at work. A knock at the door. Michael. Sarah's voice. Daddy's waiting in the restaurant. The hotel restaurant buzzed with morning business, suits and laptops, phones and coffee cups. Heads turned as Michael and Sarah entered. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup covering the shadows under her eyes. Thompson sat at a corner table, Eleanor beside him. 4 cups of coffee waited. Sleep well? Thompson asked as they sat. Michael nodded. Sarah just shrugged. The press is having a field day, Eleanor said, sliding a newspaper across the table. The headline read, Thompson heiress jilts groom. Vanishes on wedding day. Let them talk, Sarah said. They will. For weeks, probably. Thompson stirred his coffee. Which is why timing matters. We need to control the narrative. Robert, Eleanor warned. No, he's right, Michael said. If we're going to make this community center work, we need public support. And right now, all they see is scandal. So we give them something else to see. Sarah pulled out her phone, opened her photos. I took these last night. Under the bridge, the photos showed Pete and Maria, but not like most people would shoot homeless subjects. No pity, no exploitation. Just humanity. Pete sharing his blanket with Maria, both of them laughing at some joke. The snow falling around them looked almost magical. You took these? Thompson asked, surprised. It's what I do, Daddy. What I want to do. Show people what they don't want to see. Eleanor touched one photo gently. They're beautiful, darling. They're real, Sarah corrected. And there are hundreds more stories like theirs. At the community center about that, Thompson put down his coffee. I had my assistant research this place. Bronzeville Hope Center. Been operating on a shoestring for 5 years. Running after-school programs, job training, literacy classes. Director's name is Marcus Williams. You work fast, Michael said. I work smart. Marcus is expecting us at 9. Eleanor's coming too. She has experience with charitable foundations. Sarah blinked. You're really serious about this? You gave me 2 choices last night, Thompson said quietly. Help you build something meaningful, or watch you destroy yourself trying to live the life I planned. Not much of a choice, really. A waiter appeared with breakfast, eggs, toast, fruit. Michael's stomach cramped at the sight of real food. Eat slowly, Eleanor advised, noticing. Your body needs time to adjust. They ate in silence for a while. Through the restaurant windows, Chicago was waking up. Snow plows cleared the streets. People hurried to work, collars turned up against the cold. James called, Eleanor said finally. And Rachel. Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. I told them both not to contact you again, Eleanor continued. Ever, Mom? No. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Shouldn't be. Thompson checked his watch. Car's waiting. Sarah, you should change before Dash. I'm going like this, she said firmly. The center's clients don't need another rich person looking down on them. Fine. Michael, there's a coat for you in the lobby. The coat was wool, expensive but not flashy. It fit perfectly. Michael tried not to think about how much it cost. The drive to Bronzeville was quiet. Sarah kept checking her photos. Thompson made calls about canceling honeymoon reservations, handling wedding gift returns. Eleanor just watched the city pass by. The Hope Center occupied an old warehouse. Faded murals covered the brick walls. Children playing, people helping each other, a sunrise. The snow had been shoveled from the entrance, revealing worn concrete steps. Inside, warmth and noise hit them. Kids ran through the halls, headed to before-school programs. Adults clustered around coffee and donuts. Some in work clothes, others clearly homeless. No one stared at them. No one seemed to care who they were. Mr. Thompson? A tall black man approached, hand extended. Marcus Williams, thank you for coming. Thompson shook his hand. Call me Robert. This is my wife Eleanor, my daughter Sarah, and Dr. Michael Johnson. Marcus's eyes lingered on Michael. Dr. Johnson? The counselor? You know him? Sarah asked. Know of him. You help a lot of people in this neighborhood before. Marcus trailed off. Well, before. Michael swallowed hard. I'd like to help again. If you'll have me, come to my office. All of you. Marcus led them through the bustling halls. Sorry for the chaos. Morning's always busy. His office was small, cluttered with papers and photos. More kids' artwork covered the walls. A space heater hummed in the corner. So, Marcus said once they were seated. Sarah mentioned some ideas on the phone about expanding our services. We'd like to help, Thompson said. Properly. Legally. Make this place what it could be. Marcus leaned back. With all due respect, Mr. Thompson, Robert, we've had rich people offer help before. They come, take photos for their charity newsletters, write a check, feel good about themselves. Then they leave. Our people are still here, still struggling. I'm not leaving, Sarah said. I want to teach here. Photography. Help people tell their stories. And I want to counsel, Michael added. Once my license is reinstated. Marcus studied them both. Why? Because last night, I almost jumped off a bridge, Sarah said bluntly. And the only person who really saw me, really helped me, was a homeless man who used to be a counselor. Made me realize how many others need the same thing. To be seen. To be heard. To heal. Michael added quietly. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Outside his office, kids laughed. Someone started playing piano in the music room. We need a lot, he said finally. Roof repairs. Better heating. More classrooms, proper counseling spaces. Insurance. Staff. Make a list, Thompson said. A real one. Everything. Why? Marcus asked again. Why us? Why now? Because my daughter almost died last night, Thompson replied, his voice rough. Because I finally saw what my control, my plans, my expectations were doing to her. Because maybe it's time I used my money for something more than making more money. Eleanor touched his hand. Sarah wiped her eyes. The press will be watching, Marcus warned. Rich girls' wedding drama turns to charity? They'll eat it up. Let them, Sarah said, as long as they show the truth. All of it, Even the hard parts? Especially those? She pulled out her phone, showed him the photos from under the bridge. People need to see. Really see. Marcus looked at the photos for a long time. Then at Michael. You lived it. The streets. The struggle. Michael nodded. 2 years. And now you want to help others through it? I want to help them survive it. Then more than survive. Like Sarah helped me. Marcus stood, went to his window. Kids played basketball in the snow-covered court below. Okay, he said finally. But we do this right. No shortcuts. No quick fixes. Real change takes time. We have time, Sarah said. And we're not going anywhere. Thompson pulled out his phone. I'll have my lawyers draw up paperwork. Proper nonprofit status. Board of directors. I'd like to stay on that board, Marcus said firmly. Keep things real. Wouldn't have it any other way. They spent the next hour talking details, budgets, permits, timelines. Through it all, Michael watched the life of the center flow past the office door. People helping people. Simple as that. When they finally left, Sarah lingered in the hallway, watching a group of kids work on a mural. You okay? Michael asked. Better than okay. She smiled. That real smile again. For the first time in forever, I know exactly where I'm supposed to be. Outside, the snow had started falling again. But this time, it didn't feel like an enemy. This time, it felt like a clean start. Michael. Sarah pointed across the street. Isn't that? Pete and Maria stood there, watching them. Maria raised her hand in a small wave. Go, Sarah said. Talk to them. Tell them what's happening here. Michael crossed the street, snow crunching under his new boots. Behind him, he heard Thompson asking about zoning permits, Eleanor discussing foundation structures, Sarah describing her photography program plans. Nice coat, Pete said as Michael reached them. Nice blanket, Michael replied, seeing his old blanket still wrapped around Pete's shoulders. Fancy hotel's one thing, Maria said. But this? She nodded toward the center. This is real. This matters. Want to be part of it? Michael asked. Center needs people who understand. Really understand. Pete and Maria exchanged looks. Hope was dangerous on the streets, but so was staying frozen in one place forever. Maybe, Maria said finally. Maybe we do. 6 weeks changed everything. The Hope Center hummed with new life. Fresh paint on the walls, heat in every room, proper counseling offices with actual doors. Michael stood in his newly assigned space, running his fingers over the framed license on the wall. Reinstated, current legal. The door opened. Marcus stuck his head in. Ready? First client's here. Michael adjusted his tie. Still strange after 2 years without one. Send them in? Pete hobbled through the door, leaning on a cane. The arthritis had gotten worse with the winter cold. Ain't sure about this therapy stuff, Pete grumbled, lowering himself into the chair. But Maria said I should try. How is she? Haven't seen her around lately. Working. Pete smiled proudly. Center got her a job at that diner down the street. Real job? With paychecks and everything? Michael grabbed his notepad. Simple spiral-bound. Not the leather-bound ones he used to use. Tell me about the arthritis. How's it affecting your sleep? They talked for an hour. Not just about pain and weather, but about dignity. About what it meant to accept help after years of surviving alone. About change. Sarah's got Maria taking pictures now, Pete said near the end of the session, teaching her about light and angles and stuff. Maria's got a good eye. She always did. Saw things others missed. Like you did? That night on the bridge. Michael set down his notepad. Sometimes we see better when we've been invisible ourselves. After Pete left, Michael had 2 more clients. A teenager getting into fights at school. A single mom struggling with anxiety. Simple problems, real problems, no corporate executives worrying about stock options. Just people trying to survive, to heal, to grow. Around noon, Sarah knocked on his door. She'd cut her hair short, traded designer clothes for jeans and practical shoes. A camera hung around her neck. Lunch break, she announced. I'm buying. They walked to the diner where Maria worked. The place had become their regular spot. Good food, fair prices, no pretense. Maria waved from behind the counter. The usual? Please. Sarah slid into their booth, started showing Michael pictures on her camera. Got some good ones this morning. Kids in the art class. some of the job training folks. The photos were beautiful in their simplicity. No posed shots, no artificial lighting. Just real moments. A child's look of concentration, an adult's pride in learning something new. Tribune wants to run a story, she said, stirring her coffee. About the center, about what we're doing here. Your father okay with that? Actually, it was his idea. Said if people are going to talk anyway, might as well show them something worth talking about. Their food arrived, meatloaf for Michael, soup for Sarah. Maria lingered at their table. Got my first paycheck today, she said proudly. Real bank account, and everything. That's great, Michael said. How's the apartment hunting going? Found a place. Small, but clean. Pete's gonna move in too, help with rent. She hesitated. Gonna miss the bridge sometimes, though. Strange as that sounds. Not strange at all, Michael assured her. It was home. After lunch, Michael had group therapy, homeless folks transitioning to shelter housing. Hard stories, raw emotions. No easy answers, but at least they had warm rooms to talk in, coffee to drink, people who understood. Thompson stopped by in the afternoon, looking oddly out of place in his expensive suit. He'd kept his promise, handled the legal work, set up the foundation, stayed involved without taking control. Even joined a session once, talking about his own fears and failures as a father. Numbers look good, he said, reviewing the center's files. State funding coming through. Private donations picking up. Sarah's photos help, Michael said. Make people see the real stories. Speaking of Sarah, Thompson hesitated. She seems happy, really happy. She is. We all are. Evening brought more clients, more stories. Michael kept his door open between sessions, listening to the life of the center. Kids laughing in after-school programs, adults working on computers in the job search room. The click of Sarah's camera capturing it all. At 6, his last client left. Michael sat in his office, looking at the framed photo on his desk. Him and Sarah on the bridge, taking the day they'd started work on the center. Both of them bundled against the cold, smiling real smiles. A knock at his door. Eleanor Thompson stood there, elegant as always but somehow softer. Thought I'd find you still here, she said. Working late again? Lost track of time. Michael gestured to a chair. Everything okay? More than okay. She sat, smoothing her skirt. The foundation board met today. We've approved funding for 3 more centers like this one. Different neighborhoods, same model. Michael's breath caught. 3. To start with. Sarah will oversee the photography programs, train others to document the work, tell the stories. And we'd like you to supervise the counseling services. All of them. Eleanor, before you say no, think about it. You'd still counsel here, but you'd also help set up programs in other centers. Train new counselors. Share what you've learned. Through his office window, Michael could see Sarah in the courtyard, teaching a teenager how to use a camera. The kid's face glowed with concentration. 2 months ago, I was sleeping under a bridge, Michael said quietly. And now you're helping others find their way across bridges of their own. Eleanor stood. Just think about it. That's all we're asking. After she left, Michael walked through the center. The day programs were winding down, evening classes starting up. Pete sat in the common room, teaching chess to a young boy. Maria counted her tips from the diner. Sarah reviewed photos with her students. 2 months. Such a short time, really. But time enough for wounds to start healing, for hope to take root, for change to begin. His phone buzzed, a text from Thompson. Dinner tonight? Need to discuss expansion plans. Another buzz, Sarah. Dad's buying. Maria's diner. Pete's coming too. A third, Marcus, bring those budget proposals. And your appetite. Michael texted back one word, yes. Outside his office, the center hummed with life. People helping people. Simple as that. He grabbed his coat. The same one Thompson had given him that first morning, now worn comfortable with use. The license on his wall caught the evening light. Michael Johnson, licensed counselor. Not just surviving anymore. Living. Helping. Healing. Sarah appeared in his doorway, camera in hand. Ready? Ready, he said. And he was. Ready for dinner, for tomorrow, for whatever came next. Ready to keep building something real. Together, they walked out into the winter evening. The bridge where they'd met was visible in the distance, its lights reflecting on the river. But they weren't heading there tonight. Tonight, they were heading to the diner, to family, the one they'd chosen, the one they'd built. 3 more centers, Sarah said as they walked. Think we can do it? Michael thought about Pete teaching chess, Maria counting tips, kids learning to see beauty through camera lenses. Thought about all the other Petes and Marias out there, all the other people needing to be seen, to be heard, to heal. Yeah, he said, we can do it. Together. The diner's windows glowed warm against the early dark. Inside, their people waited. Outside, the city stretched away, full of bridges, full of stories, full of possibilities. They'd crossed one bridge 2 months ago, a bride in a torn dress and a homeless man with nothing left but his training and his heart. Now they were building new bridges, stronger ones. Bridges of hope, of healing, of home. Sarah raised her camera, caught the moment. Michael in his worn wool coat, standing in the winter light, ready to step forward, ready to help others cross their own bridges, one step at a time. 1 year to the day after that night on the bridge, Michael stood in the same spot where he'd first seen Sarah. The river flowed below, dark and steady. City lights sparkled on the water, just like they had that night. Thought I'd find you here, Sarah said, walking up beside him. Her camera hung at her side, ever present. Feeling nostalgic? Just thinking? Michael leaned on the railing. 1 year ago, I was sleeping down there. He nodded toward the space under the bridge. Now look at us. The Hope Center had grown beyond their wildest dreams, 3 new locations across Chicago, just as Eleanor had planned. Hundreds of lives touched, changed, improved. Real change, not just Band-Aid solutions. Pete's teaching chess at all 4 centers now, Sarah said, snapping a picture of the river. Says it helps kids learn strategy, patience. And Maria, assistant manager at the diner, taking business classes at community college. Sarah smiled. She's using my old camera, says it helps her see beauty in everyday things. A police car drove by slowly. Officer Jenkins was behind the wheel. He waved at them. No suspicion now, just friendly recognition. They worked together over the past year, creating better ways to help the homeless instead of just moving them along. Your father called today, Michael said. Wants to expand to Detroit next year. What did you tell him? That we need to make sure what we have here is solid first. That real change takes time. Sarah nodded. He's learning. Finally, they stood in comfortable silence, watching the city move around them. A year ago, they'd both been broken here. A runaway bride and a homeless counselor, both thinking they'd reached the end of their stories. Instead, it had been a beginning. I went by the church yesterday, Sarah said quietly. First time since, How was it? Strange. Peaceful, almost. James and Rachel got married last month. Did you hear? No. You okay with that? Sarah laughed. A real laugh, free of bitterness. Actually, yeah. They did me a favor, really. Showed me what I didn't want before I was trapped in it. Footsteps approached. Pete and Maria joined them on the bridge. Both better dressed now. Healthier. Pete still used a cane, but he moved more easily. Memorial service is starting soon, Maria reminded them. The annual service had been Sarah's idea. A way to remember those who hadn't made it off the streets, who hadn't found their bridge to a better life. They held it at the original Hope Center, with candles and stories and promises to do better. Thompson called, Pete said. Says he's actually coming this year. Mom too, Sarah added. She's been working with the foundation full-time now. Says it gives her purpose. They walked together toward the center. The streets were familiar now, but different. They knew the people they passed. The shop owners who donated food, the teachers who volunteered after school, the former clients who'd become success stories. The center glowed with warmth and light. People filled the common room. Homeless folks, volunteers, counselors, students. Photos lined the walls. Sarah's work, telling their stories. Not just the hard parts, but the hope too. Michael touched one photo, his favorite. It showed his old spot under the bridge, now empty except for a sign. Need help? Hope Center, 3 blocks east. All welcome. Marcus met them at the door. Good turnout this year. Better than good, Michael agreed. How many now? 217, Marcus said proudly. That's how many we've helped get off the streets this year. Real jobs, real homes, real lives. Inside, Michael found his old blanket framed on the wall. Sarah had insisted. Where it all started, the caption read, "The Thompsons arrived just before the service began." Robert looked different now, less corporate, more human. Eleanor had traded designer suits for practical clothes that could handle hugging kids and serving meals. "Michael," Thompson said, shaking his hand. "Been looking at the numbers. Impressive work. It's not about numbers anymore, is it?" Michael asked. Thompson looked around the room. At Pete teaching chess to a group of kids, at Maria showing a new waitress how to use a camera, at Sarah documenting it all. "No," he admitted. "It's not." The service was simple. They read names, lit candles, shared stories. Not just sad stories, but stories of hope, of change, of lives turned around. Afterward, they gathered at Maria's diner. It had become their tradition, coffee and pie. Family style. Michael looked around the table. Pete and Maria, Sarah and her parents, Marcus, clients turned friends, friends turned family. "Speech," Pete called out, tapping his coffee cup. "Dr. Johnson needs to make a speech." Michael stood, uncomfortable with attention, but knowing it was expected. "A year ago, I was invisible," he began. "Just another homeless man under a bridge. Then this crazy woman in a wedding dress showed up." Laughter rippled around the table. Sarah wiped her eyes, smiling. "But here's what I learned," Michael continued. "Sometimes the worst moment of your life can lead to the best, if you're brave enough to keep going. If you're lucky enough to find people who see you. Really see you." He looked at Sarah, who'd seen past his ragged clothes to the counselor underneath. At Pete and Maria, who'd shared their world under the bridge. At the Thompsons, who'd learned to see past appearances to what mattered. "We talk about helping people cross bridges," he said. "But maybe the real bridge is the one between seeing and being seen. Between surviving and living. Between despair and hope." Sarah raised her camera, caught the moment. Michael standing, surrounded by family, telling their story. Their shared story of falling and rising, of losing and finding, of healing and helping others heal. "To Bridges," Thompson said, raising his coffee cup. "To Bridges," they all echoed. Later, walking home to his apartment, a real home now, with books and plants and pictures on the walls, Michael stopped on the Michigan Avenue Bridge. The spot where everything had changed. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Look up." He did. Through her lens, she caught the exact moment. Him on the bridge, city lights behind him, looking not down at the dark water, but up at the endless sky. Not just surviving anymore. Living. Helping. Healing. "Perfect shot," he texted back. "Always is," she replied. "When you see what matters." The city hummed around him, full of stories waiting to be heard, lives waiting to be changed, bridges waiting to be crossed. Tomorrow, he'd be back at the center, helping others find their way across their own bridges. But tonight, he stood where it all began, grateful for second chances, for real smiles, for the simple truth that sometimes the worst moment of your life can lead you exactly where you need to be. One last buzz from his phone. A group text to their whole strange, wonderful family. "Same time next year?" Michael typed back one word. "Always." Then he walked home through the Chicago night, no longer invisible, no longer just surviving. On every street corner, every doorway, he saw possibilities. Bridges waiting to be built. Stories waiting to be changed. Just like his had been. That snowy night when a runaway bride and a homeless counselor found something bigger than themselves. Found purpose. Found family. Found home. Not under a bridge anymore, but because of one. Because sometimes rock bottom is just the foundation for building something stronger. Something real. Something that lasts. Home.